Hello, I am Forecaster, and if you are from the Frontier forums, you may not know me. If you're one of the followers of my YouTube channel, you of course know me already. And this video is about an application that I am developing called Commander's Log Continued. It is based on the original Commander's Log from Arch v1, who is, of course, no longer working on it, which is why I decided to revive it. And finally, the first beta version is ready for release. And in this video, I'm going to go over what the application does, which is pretty basic at the moment. We're going to have a look at what features are available. We're going to have a look at the file structure of the save files, as well as the current settings, which are pretty simple at the moment. So, as you can see, I have the 64-bit Windows version in a directory in my C drive called Commander's Log Continued. And I'm going to extract here. Just going to extract all the files in that archive into this directory. Then I'm going to delete the archive because I don't need it anymore. Now on Windows, you're done with the installation. All you need to do is run this executable. On Linux, you need to change the permissions of the Commander's Log Continued file and the Commander's Log Continued .desktop to allow them to run as applications. Otherwise, the application will not be able to start. Once you've done that, you can double-click the desktop file to start the application, or start the non-desktop file from a terminal will also work. But I'm just going to double-click this executable. The application, as you can see, is going to start. It's going to play a little intro. And you also saw that it created a directory here called data. And this is where it's going to store, well, all of its data. If I go in here, you're going to see it has created some files with some presets in them. We have the commodities, presets, and settings. Commodities is pretty obvious. It's all the commodities and categories. Presets are all these things, as well as some states for other things. And we're going to have a look at these, what these look like later. But for now, let's just focus on the application itself. So you can see that the interface is pretty similar to the original application, if you saw that. It has the station and system list on the left, some station information on the right, and some buttons on the bottom. So we have the add button for adding systems and stations, edit and delete buttons, which don't do anything at the moment. I haven't implemented them yet. We have the trade button, which opens the trade window, and the settings button, which opens the settings window. We also have a donate button, which was requested that I add. Now, I don't do this for money. I do this because I want to, because I like developing things. But if you feel like it, you can donate something, whatever, to my PayPal, but don't feel that you have to. This will open a window that has some information about that. This button will open a window that has some information, that has a short description of the application, and some links to the GitHub issue tracker. It has my email address in case you want to contact me. It also has some additional stuff. You can check that out on your own. I'm not going to show it in the video. If you're curious about that, you're going to have to download the application. So we're going to have a quick look at the settings, which this list is pretty short at the moment. Presentation could use some work as well. We have 4 different settings. This one doesn't do anything at the moment. It is broken. Um, play intro does do something. Removing this will prevent the application from showing my logo at startup, which you may prefer. It doesn't show for very long, but maybe you still want to be able to interact with it or right away. So you can turn that off. Auto refresh station list. This list here refreshes every 5 seconds. And this is mostly to update the age here. And you can turn that off here. And it's going to stop updating. It will then update when you add new stations or systems only at the moment. Save directory doesn't affect most of these files. This will allow you to choose where it's going to save the station and system data, which is a separate file. So if you click this, it's going to open a file selection dialog, and it's going to default into here. And if this is not set, it's going to default to here automatically. But if you want to, that popped back on its own, which is interesting. You can pick any other directory on your computer, and you can name the file whatever you want as well. It doesn't have to be named this. It should still have the .json file extension though, although that isn't really necessary either, but it's good to be able to see what type of file it is, in case you forgot. But yeah, you can do that. Clicking this button, of course, will reset the value to whatever its default was. So in this case, it would be, if I were to set this, I can click this to put it back to not set, and will then default back to here. So those are the settings, and the window has the wrong title apparently. Forgotten to change that, but that's fine. I'll fix that eventually. So now we're going to add a system and a station. So as you can see, there are no items, there are no systems defined currently. So I'm going to add Cremain. Type that in there, and you can only add one system at a time. And you can see that it now generated a file here, even though it hasn't actually saved anything yet. So this will be pretty much empty. Now we're going to add a station, and unfortunately I don't remember an actual station that is in Cremain, so we're just going to add station 1. You can also add multiple stations at a time, however many you like, by separating them with commas. And I'm going to add 2 stations, just because I can. I'm going to need 2 later anyway. Let's add 3 actually. Station 3. And you'll notice that this one doesn't have a space in it. And then I'm going to click Add. It's going to clear the fields, but it's not going to close the window, which would be what that setting would do if it worked. So you can see that it added my 3 stations here, and it will also have saved them in this file now, which is still just 1 kilobyte in size. We can now close, actually, now that there is a system defined and stored in here, as well as in memory, of course, if I click the system input, it's going to show me that there is a system already defined. And if I want to reuse that, I can just click this, and it's going to input it into here. So really what this does is it stores the ID of the station in the background, and it puts the name in this field for display. And there's a difference. We're going to show that later. But what you can do, an ID for anything is the name with all spaces replaced by underscores, and all lowercase. So for Cremain, the ID would be just with a lowercase k. Now if I enter the ID in here, it's going to do basically what clicking this would do. It's going to replace that with the actual name. It's going to store the ID in the background. If you enter a new system in here, and it does the same for stations, of course, it's going to take the name and convert it into an ID and use that to store the data. Now, if you enter the name here like this, without using this and without entering the ID here, it is going to think that this is a new station. It's going to convert that into an ID as it did when you first created it. And it should still work because the ID already exists. It's not going to try to create it again. It's just going to add any new stations onto that. I think, at least. Let's try that. Let's add station 4. And there you can see that it added the station fine. So I believe that works. Hopefully it didn't add another station entry. It shouldn't be able to, because the ID needs to be unique. So it probably referenced the existing Cremain. But yeah, so that is that. Now, if I click one of these stations, it doesn't show this in any way at the moment, but it has selected that as the active station, which means that these fields are now going to affect that. Unfortunately, these services are broken. It doesn't store the data properly, I found earlier, but it's too late to fix that in this particular version, so that will be fixed in the next one. But these work. So if I want to set the economy of the station 1, which I have currently selected, I'll click this field, and I can type in any value I want in here, similarly to the original application, and it's going to store that value for this station, but it's not going to store it as a global preset in this case. Systems are global. They will remember them and present them as an option when you add more stations. But for these values, if I type in like gas station, it is only going to remember that for this station. It's not going to show up in this list when editing other stations. These are loaded from the presets file, as are all of these. And if I want to enter one of these, I can simply put in extraction there. And similarly to how the system worked, it is actually storing the ID of this app preset, which in this case would be extraction with a lowercase e, and it is referring to that when displaying this name. So what you can do, as we'll see later, is you can change the name without changing the ID, and it will update all the stations that refer to that ID. And they will display the new name without having to edit every single station, which is handy. And all of these work the same way, pretty much. And all of these do nothing at the moment. The data isn't used by the application. It's just for your own utility at the moment to see, for example, what type of starport something is. Some of these may be used for filtering, for example, filtering this list or in trade route generation eventually, but for now they aren't used for anything. Now, if I click another station, because I still currently have station 1 selected, it's going to empty the fields because this station doesn't have any of these set. If I click back to station 1, it's going to put them back. Now, it doesn't do this for these because they are broken. The data is not stored correctly, which, like I said, I'm going to fix later. But that's pretty much that. Now, if I want to edit the commodities of a station, I'll double-click it, and it will open the commodities window, the actual commodities window. for Cremain Station 1. And you can see that it generates a list of commodities and categories. And they are loaded from the commodities file, of course, at application start. So we then have status, price, quantity, and age. Age is currently unused. The age is per station at the moment and not per commodity. And that will probably change in the future when I have time to implement that. But so I can set explosives. We're going to set that to medium demand. And once I click outside of this field to lose focus on it, it's going to store that data. And then I can also set a price, and you can see that the age reset for station 1 after about 5 seconds when the list updated. Now I can also set a price. So I need to set the price to 50 credits. And then the age resets again. I'm also going to add hydrogen fuel, high demand, 100 credits. And that's going to reset the age again. Now these values will be stored for this station. So if I close this and reopen it, it's going to remember them, of course. It would be quite useless if it didn't. Now, I'm going to go to station 3. And for explosives, I'm going to add high supply with a price of 25 credits. With a price of 25 credits. And for hydrogen fuel, I'm going to add a low supply with a price of 80. Should do. And now it's going to store those values as well. You can see that it reset the age there as well. Now, in the trade window, this is pretty basic, but it looks very similar to the original application. We can choose the origin system and the target system. And it will only display origin systems that have supply, and it will only display target systems that have demand. And I do this to shorten these lists to avoid crowding them unnecessarily. Then you can choose which levels you want to include. I'm going to include all of them. And I'm going to leave these as anywhere because I only have 2 stations or 1 of each anyway. And then I click Find Routes. Then it's going to generate a list of all of the trades and simply display it. So we can see that from station 3 I can buy explosives at medium supply and take them to the high demand at station 1, and I will lose 25 credits per ton if I do that. Now why is that? That is because at station 1 explosives cost 50 credits, and at station 3 I get paid 25 credits. So I reverse those values, of course. So it will show I will make a loss if I were to do that. If I'd reverse the values now, we can actually do that. Let's do 60 credits there. Actually, let's purchase for 30 credits, hydrogen fuel for 50 credits, and then we can sell them for 80 and 100. And then I'm going to regenerate this, and I'll make a profit of 50 credits per ton for each now, which is a bit better. Indeed. So that is pretty much the application itself. Now the files as you can see, are stored in the JSON format, which is a standard format that can be written and read by a lot of languages. Um, and we're going to have a look at one of the files. Let's have a look at the commodities file. I'm going to open that in brackets, which is a code editor, basically, simple code or text editor that has some syntax highlighting, as you can see. So you can see that we have categories, and the categories have labels or names. And then we have commodities with an associated name. And the orange string is the name of each commodity and category, and the purple string is the key. Now, if you change the key, that is going to break every station that is referring to this commodity. However, if you change the name, every station that refers to this commodity is going to display the new name while still remembering everything else, such as price, etc. So yeah, now the JSON format is pretty strict about mistakes. So I wouldn't recommend editing these files manually unless you know what you're doing, at least when adding or removing things. If you're just changing a value like a string, for example, explosives here, that is pretty simple, and you're unlikely to make a mistake doing that, unless you accidentally remove a quotation mark or something. But if you're doing more advanced stuff, I would recommend using either a JSON editor, or at the very least, after modifying the file, running it through a JSON validator before trying to use it in the application. If the application tries to load a file, a JSON file that has a mistake in it, it is going to silently fail. So, for example, maybe if you make a mistake in the system stations file, this list will simply not load. Those will be empty when the application starts. Now, the application reads in the values of these files when it starts, and then keeps them in memory until it is closed. It will, when something is edited, like when you add a new station or edit one of these values, it's going to update the memory, and then it's going to dump its entire memory for that file into the corresponding file. It's going to overwrite whatever is there at the moment. So if you want to edit these, you should close the application first, then edit the file, and then restart it to make sure that it doesn't overwrite what you did, and that it reads it properly. And that's pretty much it. So, of course, if you find any more bugs, or if you have a feature request, either something that was in the original application or something new, you can find out how to give me those in this window here. I should probably also add a link to the forum post on the Frontier forums there. But yeah, so that is that, and with that, I will see you next time.